Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, July 29th, 2024. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, Druze Mourn, 12 children killed in the Golan Heights. So on Sunday, members of the Arab Druze community in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights mourned 12 children who were killed when a rocket hit a soccer field in the village of Majdal Shams a day earlier. So a rocket, this was on Saturday, struck these kids while they were playing soccer. A few teenagers, most of them younger than that, and they were killed. And this is the Druze community in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. Israel is blaming Hezbollah for this. Hezbollah denies that it was responsible. They told the UN, apparently, that an Israeli anti-rocket interceptor hit the soccer field. Now you have the U.S. is backing Israel's claim, which, of course, is not a surprise. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that there was every indication that Hezbollah was behind the strike. Syria has blamed the incident on Israel and said the Israeli government was trying to use it to escalate in Lebanon. And the Golan Heights is considered Syrian territory. It was captured from Syria in the 1967 war. Israel annexed it in 1981. Nobody recognized it until 2019 when the Trump administration recognized the Golan Heights as Israeli. That's why you have a settlement there called Trump Heights. They were very happy with Trump for doing that. But under international law, the UN and every other country except for the U.S. and Israel consider it to be Syrian territory. So the Syrian Foreign Ministry said, quote, as part of attempts to escalate the situation in the region, Israeli occupation entity committed a heinous crime on Saturday in Majdal Shams town and then held the Lebanese National Resistance accountable for this crime, end quote. They're referring to Hezbollah there. And now Lebanon's foreign minister, so this is the government, the Lebanese government, their foreign minister, Abdallah Abu Habib, said, quote, since the beginning of the war, Hezbollah has been targeting military sites and not civilians, and I don't think that it carried out this attack in Majdal Shams, end quote. And he called for an investigation and said the attack must have been, quote, carried out by other organizations, or it must have been an Israeli mistake or a mistake by Hezbollah. So no matter what the real story is here, Israel seems like they're going to use this to really escalate in Lebanon. They had a meeting of their security cabinet on Sunday, and according to the reports, they're preparing for a big strike in Lebanon. The Israeli media says they're going to do it so to avoid a full-blown war, but it's very hard to control those things. So something could be happening soon. Again, I'm recording this Sunday night before midnight. There's a chance I think something could happen overnight, maybe. So one thing, when we talk about this, most of the Druze in the Golan Heights consider themselves Syrian, and they've rejected offers for Israeli citizenship. And according to CNN, none of the 12 children who were killed were Israeli citizens. And during the funeral, Israeli ministers showed up, and mourners there protested their presence. One of them was Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, and there's these videos of protesters shouting at him. One protester said, quote, get out of here, you criminal. We don't want you in the Golan, end quote. And Israeli ministers attended the funeral despite a request from community leaders not to come. So the Druze Authority Forum said in a letter to the Israeli government, quote, do not come. Given the sensitivity of the situation, we ask not to turn this massacre into a political event. We demand a quiet religious funeral according to Druze customs, end quote. And again, there's a big risk of this really exploding now on the Israel-Lebanon border. You just had Netanyahu. He just came back from the U.S. He cut his trip early to come back after this happened, convenes a security cabinet on Sunday night. He wants a big war. He just came back from the U.S. where he had a very warm welcome. So, again, I think there's a chance Israel could do something big here. And I just put in the numbers. So, as we know, Israel and Hezbollah have been trading fire across the border just about every day. According to a tally from AFP, Israeli attacks on southern Lebanon have killed at least 527 people, including 104 children. On the Israeli side, 18 soldiers and 24 civilians have been killed, and that includes the 12 Druze children. All right, so the next one here. Netanyahu delays evacuation of 150 sick children from Gaza. So Israeli media reported on Sunday that Netanyahu delayed the evacuation of 150 sick and wounded Palestinian children from Gaza to the UAE. So a source told Haaretz that Netanyahu made this decision in response to the killing of the 12 Arab Druze children in the Golan Heights. So he's punishing children for that. And again, this was reported by several different Israeli media outlets. And Netanyahu's decision to punish the sick and wounded children was denounced by the group Physicians for Human Rights. They called it a, quote, cruel game by the Israeli government with children's lives, end quote. So last week, Netanyahu had instructed his government to arrange the transport of sick and wounded Palestinians from Gaza to a third country for treatment. And the first plane was due to take off on Monday, but the flight has now been canceled. And this is something, we've seen Israel kind of agree to these things. The U.S. asked them to do something, let more aid in here, do this, build a field hospital for Palestinian children. And they say, yeah, we'll do it. And then they end up canceling those plans. And that's something else Netanyahu recently blocked, was the building of a field hospital in Israel for children in Gaza who are wounded. And tens of thousands have been wounded and maimed. And I mean, it's just a complete horror show. It's a war on children. And so one of the reasons why, you probably had the UAE, the U.S., the regional countries say, you got to get some of these children out of there, was because at least some were able to leave through Egypt. But that has changed since Israel captured the Rafah border crossing on May 7th. And then I just put according to Gaza's media office, 16,000 Palestinian children have been killed by the Israeli assault, and about 38,000 have been wounded. We've been going over lately what the medics, what the foreign doctors and nurses who volunteer in Gaza say when they get back. These American doctors and surgeons saying that Palestinian children are getting shot in the head by Israeli snipers. Again, just a war on children. And here you have Netanyahu taking an action. Just the fact that they're delaying the evacuation of sick and wounded children in response to something that's happened. I mean, it is just goes to show the punishment of children. And it's not like, again, we don't know even exactly what happened in the Golan Heights with those 12 Druze children. We certainly know for sure that no matter what happened, sick and dying Palestinian children in Gaza had nothing to do with it. And, this could mean death. This is life and death when you have these kids suffering from malnutrition and wounds from airstrikes and gunshots. So this delay could kill some of them. All right, so the next one here, Erdogan says Turkey could enter Israel as it did in Libya and Nagorno-Karabakh. So on Sunday, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan appeared to threaten military intervention against Israel, saying Turkey could enter Israel as it did in Libya and Nagorno-Karabakh. He said, quote, We must be very strong so that Israel can't do these ridiculous things to Palestine. Just like we entered Karabakh, just like we entered Libya, we might do similar to them. There is no reason why we cannot do this. We must be strong so that we can take these steps, end quote. So we referred to Libya and Nagorno-Karabakh there. And starting in 2020, Turkey, which is a NATO member, it's always something you got to keep in mind. I mean, Turkey is very different from most NATO members, but they are a NATO member, and there's actually the U.S. has nuclear weapons deployed in Turkey. It's estimated they have about 20 of the gravity bombs there as part of NATO's nuclear sharing program. But anyway, back in 2020, Turkey started deploying troops, like a small number of troops to Libya, but they also sent thousands of Syrian mercenaries that were hired from Syria. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're Syrian, because you had a lot of kind of foreign fighters go into Syria as well, but they hired people in Syria and sent them into Libya to back the UN-backed Government of National Accord. And then he also mentioned Nagorno-Karabakh, and Turkey, of course, strongly backed Azerbaijan's 2020 assault on Nagorno-Karabakh by providing weapons and political support. The conflict ended in 2023 with Azerbaijan completing the ethnic cleansing of the over 100,000 ethnic Armenians who lived in Nagorno-Karabakh. You know who else provided Azerbaijan with a lot of weapons was Israel. They sold them a lot of weapons both during the assault and then before the final push that led to the ethnic that finished them off. And when it comes to Turkey and Nagorno-Karabakh, they denied that they ever intervened directly in that conflict, but there were also allegations that they were sending mercenaries from Syria to fight for Azerbaijan. So anyway, in response to Erdogan's comments about intervening in Israel, Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz warned the Turkish leader could be the next Saddam Hussein, who was toppled and later executed following the 2003 invasion of Iraq. So Katz wrote on X, quote, Erdogan follows in the footsteps of Saddam Hussein and threatens to attack Israel. Just let him remember what happened there and how it ended, end quote. So he puts up a picture of Erdogan and Saddam Hussein. And I mean, it sounds like he's threatening Turkey with the U.S. invasion, like out of everybody you could bring up. But, again, Turkey is a NATO country. And Erdogan, Erdogan has been talking a lot of smack about Israel and what's happening in Gaza. So I would chalk that up to just this more talk than anything. I would be surprised if he follows through with any sort of military intervention, but it's interesting that he's talking about it right now. The next one here, the Israeli military destroyed a key Rafah water facility that was defended by Rachel Corrie. So this article is from Drop Site News. It's written by Younis Tirawi. So there was a video posted on Instagram by an Israeli soldier showing the demolition of a water facility in Rafah. There's planting explosives on this water facility and blowing it up. And it was the caption said it was the destruction of the Tal Sultan water reservoir in honor of Shabbat. It ends with the facility being blown up. And the soundtrack that was included in the video was a song produced by soldiers of the 51st Golani Brigade with lyrics like, "We will burn Gaza, shake all of Gaza. For every house you destroy, we will destroy 10." So this goes to show how they're destroying the civilian infrastructure. They're trying to deprive Palestinians in Gaza of water. So what's interesting about this is that Rachel Corrie, who is an American activist who was crushed to death by an Israeli military bulldozer in 2003, and that was in Rafah. That was in Gaza, in Rafah, when there were still settlers in Gaza at the time. This is one of the facilities that she was trying to defend, was this particular water treatment plant. And then there's another thing in this article that I didn't see. So this is Gora Island, who's an advisor to Yoav Gallant, the Israeli defense minister. And back in October, he said that one of the strategies in Gaza is to cut off all the water supply. He said, quote, Israel, as I understand, closed the water supply to Gaza, but there are many wells in Gaza which contain water which they treat locally since originally they contain salt. If the energy shortage in Gaza makes it so that they stop pumping out water, that's good. Otherwise, we have to attack these water treatment plants in order to create a situation of thirst and hunger in Gaza. And I would say forewarn of an unprecedented economical and humanitarian crisis, end quote. So Israeli official openly talking about wanting to deprive, starve the Palestinians in Gaza. All right, so the next one here. The U.S. gave Israel 28,000 bombs since October 7th. This one's from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. The U.S. has delivered 25,000 bombs and 3,000 missiles to Israel since October 7th. The majority of the munitions are 2,000-pound unguided bombs that Tel Aviv has used during its onslaught in the Gaza Strip. So the Jewish Institute for National Security of America, which is a pro-war neoconservative think tank based in Washington, issued a report on the U.S. arms transferred to Israel since October 7th. So they got 14,100 of the 2,000-pound bombs, 8,200 of the 500-pound bombs, and 3,250-pound bombs, and 3,000 Hellfire missiles. So lots of firepower. And the list includes weapon shipments that have been publicly disclosed. Many of the arms sales have been secretive. They have not been very open about things. And in addition to the massive number of bombs, the U.S. has sent Israel 36,000 30-millimeter cannon rounds, 25 F-35s, 3,000 joint direct attack munitions, 1,800 M141 bunker defeat munitions, and 14,000 tank shells. So lots and lots of heavy firepower. And again, this is just what we know about. There could be more that we don't know about. All right, the next one here, decapitated children among victims of latest Khan Younis massacre. This article is from The Cradle. So Israeli forces massacred at least 17 Palestinians in Gaza on July 28th, which was Sunday, including 4 children, one of them a baby who was decapitated by Israeli bombs amid a broader assault on the southern city of Khan Younis. So I saw a video of this. I see these videos and I think to myself, that's got to be fake. That can't be real. Some of the I guess it's just something my brain tells me, because, you just see these horrible videos. I mean, I've seen videos of Palestinian kids with no faces, their faces hanging off, and man, and then, later on you find out this stuff gets verified by news organizations, and it's one video I saw, it looked like a beheaded baby. And this is by, Israeli airstrikes and tank shelling and everything. So 12 Palestinians were killed in a strike on a home in the center of Khan Younis in the southern Gaza Strip, and 5 others were killed in a bombing of a tent west of the southern city. An Israeli drone strike killed 1 Palestinian in Deir al-Bala. Sniper fire from an Israeli quadcopter drone killed another in Gaza City in the north. So these massacres across Gaza continue. Saturday, I believe the number was 50 or so Palestinians were killed across Gaza. Just relentless, and it's not letting up. All right, so the next one here, 2-year-old joins Gaza's ranks of thousands of orphans. This article is from AP. It's kind of a video report that they put out about this 2-year-old who's just in really bad shape, but survived an Israeli airstrike, and is just one of the many children left without parents. The 2-year-old toddler lay on a foil blanket, her face covered with salve for her burns and her little body riddled with scars from shrapnel. She squirmed, her breath heaving as doctors examined her and the tube in her chest. Sinwar Abdel Hadi is now an orphan. She's the lone survivor of an Israeli airstrike that hit her family home in central Gaza, killing her parents, her 2 sisters, and her brother, along with a brother of her mother. So one of her aunts said that the whole family was gathered around a table for lunch when they were hit. So again, just one of the many children left as an orphan. And they actually have a special acronym for this because it happens so often. They call them Wounded Child No Surviving Family, or WCNSF. That's something you see the doctors, who volunteer there, they always bring that up when they talk about how horrific this is for children. So, it's a war on children. And when you have Netanyahu come to town and everybody in Congress standing up and applauding, this is what they're applauding for, is this massacre of kids, and just about as horrific as something like this can get. All right, so the next one here, Russia will respond to U.S. missiles in Germany. So Russian President Vladimir Putin warned Sunday that Russia could deploy new missile systems in response to a planned U.S. missile deployment to Germany, and warned of a Cold War-style incident. So earlier this month, the U.S. announced that it would deploy missiles to Germany in 2026 that were previously banned by the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, the INF Treaty, which prohibited land-based missile systems with a range between 310 and 3,400 miles. The U.S. withdrew from the treaty in 2019. Putin said that Russia has maintained a unilateral moratorium on the deployment of missiles that were prohibited by the treaty, but he said that could change in response to this U.S. deployment. That was something that Russia offered the U.S. because the U.S. basically said that they were pulling out of the treaty so they could make these missiles and deploy them near China. So Russia offered, a moratorium, a mutual moratorium on the deployment of these missiles in Europe, but the U.S. did not engage on that offer. So Putin said, quote, "If the United States carries through these plans, we will consider ourselves to be free from our unilateral moratorium on deploying intermediate and shorter range strike weapons, including measures to raise the capabilities of coastal defense troops of our Navy," end quote. So he noted that these U.S. missile systems would be able to quickly strike Russian territory. He said, quote, "The fly-in time of such missiles that can eventually be equipped with nuclear warheads will constitute about 10 minutes to reach targets on our territory," end quote. And the Tomahawk missiles are part of this deployment, and they are nuclear capable. The U.S. didn't say that they would be armed with nukes. They also didn't say that they wouldn't be, so they certainly left open that possibility. And I think out of all the things that came out of the NATO summit, this is the thing that seems to have angered the Russians the most. I mean, Putin said this at a speech in St. Petersburg for Russia's Navy Day. They're having a parade, and this is something he brings up in the speech. I mean, it goes to show this is a serious, serious issue for the Russians. And, they used to have missiles pointed at each other. The Soviet Union used to have these types of intermediate range missiles in its western territory, and the U.S. had the same types of missiles in Europe, and they're pointing at each other, and they were armed with nuclear weapons. And the way that they pulled back from that was the INF Treaty. It was signed in 1987, and then Trump pulled out of it in 2019, and then Biden goes ahead with the announcement that they're going to deploy those INF-banned missiles. All right, so the next one here, the Pentagon finds $2 billion more in Ukraine aid accounting errors. So this article is from Connor Freeman. He wrote this on Friday. The Pentagon discovered $2 billion in additional accounting errors regarding its valuation of missiles, ammo, and other equipment provided to Kiev. A Government Accountability Office report found on Thursday. The Defense Department made a similar claim last year, saying that it availed Washington of $6.2 billion in weapons to fuel the Ukraine proxy war with Russia. So this latest report brings the improperly valued military material to a total of $8.2 billion, with the error said to be the result of unclear accounting definitions. So they freed up some more money that they could use to send weapons for Ukraine. Very lucky for Ukraine. When they first discovered the $6.2 billion last year, it was when they were running out of authorized funds for the proxy war. So it was a very convenient error that they discovered. So this is what they call the Presidential Drawdown Authority. That's what lets the U.S. send weapons directly from U.S. military stockpiles. So what they're saying is that when they send weapons, they value them. Initially they were valuing them at how much they cost new and not their depreciated value. So they're saying something similar for where this money came from. So Ukraine wins out again. All right, so the next one here, I shouldn't say Ukraine. The country doesn't, as long as this war goes on, but you know what I mean. The proxy war will continue. The next one here, Trump says, wipe out Iran if I'm assassinated. So former President Donald Trump said in a post on his social media site Truth Social that the U.S. should wipe Iran off the face of the earth if he's ever assassinated. So this is Trump, and this happened this was Thursday, so a few days ago. But I thought it was worth covering because this is Trump kind of bringing up this fake story that Iran was plotting to assassinate him. That was reported by CNN after the assassination attempt on him. And the CNN report said that U.S. intelligence had information from a single human source, which means a guy saying something, that Iran was plotting to kill Trump. And this report offered no evidence, and Iran strongly denied the accusations. We know Iran's been trying to avoid conflict with the U.S., but that has not stopped the Iran hawks from using this, to further their agenda. And one of those Iran hawks is Netanyahu. During his speech, he repeated this claim, saying that we recently learned that Iran was threatening to kill the former president. And so Trump posted a clip of Netanyahu saying that, and he wrote, quote, if they do assassinate President Trump, which is always a possibility, I hope that America obliterates Iran, wipes it off the face of the earth. If that does not happen, American leaders will be considered gutless cowards, end quote. So he's kind of just playing into this narrative that Iran was somehow involved or is planning to kill him or something. So Trump made this post ahead of his Friday meeting with Netanyahu at Mar-a-Lago. They had their big meeting. Trump, when they first met, there was reporters there, and Trump denied rumors that his relationship with Netanyahu ever soured, because he did say some things. He was unhappy because after the 2020 election, Netanyahu was one of the first foreign leaders to congratulate Biden on the win. And then I think there was some reports that said Trump was, really pissed about that. And he said some things about Netanyahu, but Trump says, no, we've always had a great relationship and that it was never bad. So according to a readout of the meeting put out by Trump's official website, Netanyahu thanked the former president for steps that he took during his time in office, including the assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, which brought the U.S. and Iran to the brink of war. So this is, again, a readout put out by Trump's website. And it says, quote, Prime Minister Netanyahu thanked President Trump and his administration for working to promote stability in the region through, among many historic achievements, the Abraham Accords, moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, eliminating Qasem Soleimani, ending the horrific Iran nuclear deal, as well as combating anti-Semitism in America and abroad, end quote. So after the meeting, Trump also took aim at Kamala Harris, who met with Netanyahu on Thursday. So one thing Kyle wrote up on Friday, I really kind of brushed off Kamala Harris, calling for a ceasefire and everything, because I just don't think it's genuine. I mean, I just think it's probably a campaign strategy, because behind closed doors, and she still pledged support for Israel, but apparently the Israelis were upset. They said that, in the meeting with Kamala Harris, it was very similar to the meeting with Biden, but then publicly she was saying these things about a ceasefire and say, you got to get a deal done now so you can end this thing. So the Israelis apparently weren't happy. And Trump, in another post on Truth Social, he said, quote, Netanyahu of Israel had a terrible and insulting meeting in D.C. with Kamala Harris, who also refused to preside over Congress during his speech, which is an obligation of the VP. Rarely has such a thing happened, end quote. And he also said that any Jewish American who votes for Harris should have their heads examined. So, but Netanyahu seemed to be, very happy with his meeting with Trump. All right, so the next story here, the last one, Italy to restore diplomatic ties with Syria. So this is interesting. Italy's foreign minister announced on Friday that they're going to be appointing an ambassador to Syria. So Italy is normalizing ties with Syria, and this comes after 8 EU countries, including Italy, wrote a letter to Josep Borrell, the EU's foreign policy official, saying that they should consider engaging with the Syrian government, consider reevaluating sanctions. And this is following the trend. We've seen regional countries. Syria was brought back into the Arab League last year. The Saudis reopened their embassy in Damascus. Other countries in the region as well. There's talks between Turkey and Syria. And this is something the U.S. says it's strongly opposed to, but they haven't been able to stop it. And now we're seeing Western countries do this. So including Italy now, at least 6 EU countries have some sort of diplomatic relations with Syria. The Czech Republic is one of them. They never cut off ties with Syria. They maintain them. And Greece reopened its embassy in 2021. A few other countries restored some other forms of diplomatic relations. So this is something I think we're just moving in this direction. And, the one big impediment to Israel's reconstruction is the U.S. sanctions, EU sanctions as well, that are the U.S. ones are specifically designed to prevent the country from rebuilding. So hopefully this pressure, more countries normalizing, eventually leads to the U.S. having to give up on its occupation of Syria and the sanctions. But, it could take a while. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Jonathan Cook, only a failing U.S. empire would cheer Netanyahu and his genocide. One from Andy Corbley, Washington Post fails to learn anything about sanctions. One from Ben Armbruster, what it means when someone calls you an isolationist. One from J.D. Hester, China announces Palestinian Unity Pact. One from Daniel Larison, Netanyahu's dishonest propaganda speech. So please go check all of that out. That was a lot of stuff that we went over today. I hope everybody had a good weekend. If you want to support this show, share it, tell your friends, like, subscribe, comment. All that stuff helps out. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on X. You can follow me there too. I will be back tomorrow with some more news for you. Thanks for listening.